Hello. I'm going to do a video on what to expect from green, purple, and I've got Artifacts' list on the screen. We'll jump into that in a second. I'm not going to teach you how to play green, purple. I'm not the sort of player who plays these sort of lists. So I'm going to mention that in the description I've got a link to his guide. He's wrote a really awesome guide on it. A great player, great friend as well. And on top of that, he's just put his name in on YouTube. He's just everywhere. You know the guy. He's bigger than I am, so I don't need to talk him up that much. But you're definitely green purple is a deck that you should get some reps into or play against it. Learn how it plays, what it's trying to achieve. Because I think as much as we talk about Ruby Sapphire and Amber Steel Song and Ruby Amethyst as well being like the big three of this set, this deck easily follows into that. And if you could call it the big four if you wanted to, it's always the one that does well at events. Its name's always there. It's always doing all right. And it's just got really good matchups now that it's not in a meta with Bucky being so dominant, which was just this deck just didn't have answers for Bucky. It was one of those decks like like Mufasa didn't have answers for Bucky, so we just didn't see it very much. But now that that's not the way the world's working, we've got awesome green purple players coming through and they're making amazing lists, and I think you're going to see it everywhere. And Birmingham and Vegas, I expect to see it do quite well and make a cut at those events. So getting into the list, the idea of green purple, like I say, I'm not a green purple player. I know what it's trying to achieve because I play against it so much. It's quite popular in Europe, I find. It's a tempo-based deck. It wants to amass lore. It wants to amass card advantage. It wants to make things awkward for you whilst it's gaining its win con. So for an example, we can use the card Pegasus, which is a 1/1 evasive. So if you play that on turn one, it's not going to be like they could play a 1-drop and then trade with it if the 1-drop doesn't have evasive. So it's just going to be awkward and it's just going to gain you lore. And of course, for a red deck, they're not going to want to brawl it. They're going to want to kill it somehow with an evasive card. It might just die from what do you call it? Sorry, like board wipe removal. And inside the realms of steel, yes, you've got fire the cannons, you've got Baboom, and you've got let the storm rage on would be great removal for it. But even still, it would amass a little bit of lore. It's a 1/1. It would soak up a removal action or song. And it would just achieve quite a bit of good things. So it would basically give them negative tempo and give you a positive tempo because it's going to sit there questing. Same can be said for Sir Hiss. It's a 3/1. It can trade whenever it wants to, or it can keep turning sideways. It can also be played just to make your opponent not want to turn sideways because it would just be such a nice trade, and they can never remove it as well whilst it's down there. So I think Sir Hiss is a really cool card that's making like the realms in set 5. It's making the realms. It's making the list in set 5. We've seen a lot of success with it in Lemon Lime, where it's just used to sing songs as well, and it's evasive. That's cool. Another card as well, Kit, is one to mention. Because when it's played, it bounces a card back to your opponent's hand. So you might be returning something to their hand. And of course, you haven't dealt with it, you haven't removed it the way Steel has, but you're going to force them to pay the ink again to play it. And a great example was always if they played, an opponent was going to play a 2/3 Ursula. They would play it, you would hope for it to sit there and dry, but if you play Kit, it's like bounce, and it's like, well, I'm pretty sure with 4 ink you weren't hoping to play Ursula again, but if you want the value from it, you're going to have to do it, and then hope I don't bounce it again. So it's just another great example. Lyle is a card that's made a lot of cuts as well. It's made it cut into a lot of lists. It used to be referred to the control version of green purple would only use this card. I remember that word being thrown around a lot because before we used to do a lot of merfolk flinning and we used to do a lot of aggroing of green purple. Don't know if we did flinning, but I know we did a lot of merfolking. But now it's being used in so many different ways. We can stop a Hiram from questing. We can basically force people to trade things they probably wouldn't have traded for. We can slow down their removal. If they don't have a song to sing, we're going to force them to run into it. So basically, you could play that on, say, if you were to play it on a Daisy, you would negate what Daisy's good at, which is just turning sideways and giving you lore, and force it to just basically run it into something. I'm trying to use that for an example, but I'm probably terribly wrong because I assume they actually would hit with Daisy, then they would heal it with a Rapunzel. So maybe you just use it on a Daisy and you don't turn anything sideways. I'm not explaining the deck too much because I would like to say I'm just going to keep putting my hands up and say I'm not a green purple player, but when I play into it, I know what to expect. Clarabelle, the 1-drop, I'm going to mention the 1-drop over the big drop. The big one is, I believe, it's just a very consistent big character to have on board. It does a lot of things. It does the card draw, but also 5/6 really nice. The 1-drop's the one that scares me, mainly because I'm a purple steel player. There's been many times when I've set up a purple steel player. I'm not a purple steel player. God, why did I say that? I'm a blue steel player. I've had many times when I set up Quill, I've ramped down thinking I'm going to get Tinkerbell set up the next turn because I can use the Quill again, only to find that they play a Clarabelle and break the Quill, and I'm stuck between 5 ink, and I haven't really planned for that because I've been planning to play Quill into a 6 drop. So yeah, we need to make sure that if we're playing Quill, we're not safe anymore from it. They do have removal options for our Quill. They all get a 1/2 on board, but to be honest with you, like think Rise of Titans costs 3 and you remove an item. This you pay 3, you remove an item, set a 1/2 up on board, that can be shifted. And the same, I'm going to mention as well the shift line as well for Ursula. They will commonly play Ursula on 2. I mean, on top of it, maybe stealing a song that they didn't want you to steal. Um, they also just get a nice hand knowledge, and they set up a shift line for the Ursula, which is really good. And because they have the bounce package in this deck, you may think, oh, I'm safe from Ursula because they've played one, and I'm just going to take the odds that they don't have another one in hand. They can bounce, and then they can play the Ursula again, so they can reuse a lot of the on-play abilities that are in this deck. And they can also protect their characters by questing, resetting them, or taking damage with them, resetting them, like bringing them back to hand just to play them out again. So yeah, that's just really what's going on here. You want to get as much sort of positive tempo, positive lore, just be sort of always just gaining aggregate towards your win con. And you're welcome as well as an awesome card. I think it's just very versatile for what it does. I think it's actually, I'm not going to call it broken, but I've always found the card just insanely powerful. There's an item you don't want to be on a board, there's a location you don't want to be on a board, there's a character, you're low on cards, so you can use it on your own stuff. It just has so many roles, and always think about, is this going to be your welcome to, because if your idea is I'm just going to ramp play Tamatoa, you should never do that against green purple anyway. They used to play bounce cards like Mother Knows Best and stuff like that, which would return it to your hand. So investing in a big character is sometimes quite risky and quite scary. And now it's even more. If you were to set up Dime and say I'm just going to Dime tap things to win, be worried about that, because your welcome's a really good targeted removal card for them to use. And you're welcome, if say you're playing RP, you're welcome then play Ursula to check your hand if you have a B prep, or you have something that they just don't want you having in your hand, some song that you don't want having in your hand. So yeah, it's worth mentioning. And we might have seen in past green purple lists, Queen's Castle was quite an MVP card, just because Queen's Castle is just a really good card. And you could protect it with Mother Knows Best, sung from Ursula or whatever, and you could keep it on board. I believe what's happened here is because we've cut the Ursulas and the Mother Knows Bests and sort of ways to protect the castle. We thought, well, actually, protecting the castle is really hard for us to do. We don't have hard removal like red and steel does, so the Queen's Castle is just negative in the deck now because we don't win the board hard enough to do that anymore. So a lot of the lists just have cut Queen's Castle and not even tried with the library either. Which is something to notice, that it's unlikely to see locations in these decks. So if you're thinking I don't want to ink this location hate card, just think it's unlikely they're going to have locations, because I've even not just Artabax's list, I've seen many other lists just cut them all entirely. Before I start talking about cards that aren't on the screen, I want to mention Banzai, which is really cool. I'm not saying tech Rafiki into your deck to beat it because of his protect from hyena ability. I'm not saying you ever need to tech for green purple. I think you just need to know what they're going to do and play a fair game against them, in my opinion. But it is an aggressive quester. I mean, 2 health isn't bad. If you've got steel removal, you can pretty much deal with that. Red decks will struggle with it. It's going to trade very nicely into everything. And if not, it's just going to gain 2 lore every turn for them. So it's a very strong turn 2. I've heard it described as like the weaker version of Smee because it's uninkable and it has 1 less health. But yeah, it's they've got a nice solid card to play on turn 2 now, which is always nice because bounce decks, let's say even with red purple, they got Flynn, which means they don't, before Flynn it was bounce your 1-drop for a snake or play a Cusco. And bouncing your 1-drop was never great because you kind of wanted to bounce. But now they've got the Flynn and they just play a Flynn out, and yeah, Cusco, wasn't it? It was a 1/2. But now they're like, hey, I'm going to start threatening the board and start saying, here's my strong character, let's see what you've got. So I think Banzai's a really cool addition to the deck, and I've been really liking that. A few other cards as well worth mentioning is they have the Mother Gothel package if they want it. So there is a cheaper one that you can pay extra, and it will allow them to bounce a character of their choice to your hand. And then there's the other one as well that will you play it and then your opponent picks a card that they want to bounce. So if you've invested in a big character, they can play it out and it will bounce. I don't think you're going to see that very much. It's very situational. I wouldn't worry about it too much, but I think that still goes into you playing around your welcome. Don't invest everything into one big character and just throw them on the board. Don't just throw a Tamatoa on the board or something like that. I'm only going to keep using Tamatoa as examples because I can't think of many other big cards. Mufasa, why not Mufasa as well? Don't just throw a big character on the board. They will have an answer for it. Even if they weren't playing your welcome, they would be playing Mother Knows Best or just any other bounce technique because they do need to answer bigger characters as well. They can't really ignore some things, I think, in my opinion. But some of them might just aggro and just turn sideways. There's also the Anna card. I don't think Artabax, for as much as I talk to him, I do not think he's a fan of the card. So I don't think people who follow his lists and stuff like that will really play that card. Anna is a 2/3, and you can pay an extra 3, so a total of 5 ink, and you can destroy a damaged character, or you can make your opponent discard a card. I think in green still that card shines a bit more because you can let the Storm Rage on for some extra damage onto something, and then you can play Anna to remove it, which is really good. And then you've got a 2/3 quester on board, which is awesome versus big characters because green still just has had problems with dealing with uh, Tamatoa again, or a Mufasa, or just anything that has big health because they don't have the red removal. They don't have, in a blue still deck, you can play Let It Go on a character. They don't have those things. So yeah, the positives of the deck is kind of just going to play like red purple. It's going to play tempo and efficiency and just try and win with some nice questing and just playing wide and playing some nice characters. Um, One thing to note about this deck, I've played a lot of Blue Steel into it. Blue Steel still does very, very good into it. It's probably its worst matchup is Blue Steel. So if you're bringing Blue Steel to a bigger event, this is one of your matches you want to 2-0. I think a lot of it comes down to they are still very fragile to Tinkerbell Grab Your Swords. As across the board, if you look, a lot of those characters have got 3 health. And even not, if you set a Tinkerbell up, there's evasive stuff on there that can all be checked with the 2 damage from, except for the Elsa, can all be checked with the 2 damage from when, what's her name, Tinkerbell hits something and puts the damage over to something else. So they will think about, I don't want to exert this character because Tinkerbell's going to take a nice trade here and then bounce the damage over. But also, remember, this is a bounce-based tempo deck. So if you're like, I want to exert my Cogsworth for whatever reason to get 2 lore or to sing something, think they might have a fox and a crab. They might have the cards to answer it. A lot of RP decks are playing 2 crabs, but here they've got 4 crabs and you've got 4 bounces with the Madam Minfox as well. So just be wise about when you exert things. They're going to do a lot. If they're not bouncing you, they're going to do a lot of their trades through challenging. And as well, make sure you check out the Elsa as well because they can now force you to exert, which is pretty mad. I don't think anyone want to play the big Elsa, the shift line for it, but I don't know. There's something else I'm going to just throw in there and say they have an Elsa. I don't think anyone's going to play that. That's uninkables that they just can't afford in the list, but I'm just going to make that card worth mentioning. But yeah, this is it. I think as well. Remember all the green cards they have access to. Cricky if they need a damage buff and a quester for 3. I think Cricky sometimes can flip the tempo of matchups quite a bit. I'm not like I say, it's not on the screen. Arbex hasn't picked it. I don't want him coming at me saying I bigged up Cricky when it's not a good card in the deck. But I think it's worth mentioning that it can buff damage across the board. It does 3 damage. It has a quest for 3, so it's gonna be a real tempo swinger. So yeah, this is I think exactly what you'd expect to see from green purple going into set 5. Just remember that Lyle is going to be in the deck, and just think if you're basically hoping that something's going to quest like a Hiram, they could always Lyle it, so watch out for that. Watch out for the Ursula shift line, which is when they have a 2-drop Ursula on board. I'm going to say if you're not playing Brawl, you're not a deck that can run Brawl. I think there's not much you can do about that. Maybe a Steel Song, you can let the Storm Rage on, no, let the Storm Rage on, Strength of the Raging Fire or something to deal with it. But letting them have that shift on 5 is just really big. It feels the same as letting them have a Cinderella shift on 5. It just gets so much value. It's so huge, and her ability to exert things to do even more free trades is insane. Having to hardcast all your songs is insane as well. It puts you in really a rough spot. So that shift line is one I really want to watch out for. The Clarabelle shift line, I don't think they go for it too much, but they might do. That's one you can easily check with the 2 damage on the smaller Clarabelle. But yeah, overall I'd say watch out for the Ursula shift line mainly, and make sure you watch out for Lyle's, and make sure you watch out for Ursula's. But the rest is just common bounce package stuff with some beefy characters involved. So yeah.